This segment is on blood. Blood is a fluid connective tissue that contains a fluid matrix called plasma and formed elements. Formed elements include red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. The term whole blood refers to the combination of plasma and the formed elements. Hematocrit is the percentage of whole blood volume contributed by formed elements. The normal hematocrit, also called packed cell volume, is 46 in males and 42 in females. The male sex hormones androgens stimulate blood cell production, whereas female sex hormones do not. The plasma, which is the matrix of the blood, makes up 46 to 63% the volume of whole blood. The composition of plasma is a lot like the interstitial fluid. It contains water, ions, and small solutes. The two differences between the plasma and the interstitial fluid is that the plasma contains more respiratory gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, and the plasma also contains plasma proteins. While other tissues have protein fibers in their matrix, plasma has plasma proteins. On average, there are about 5 times as many plasma proteins in the blood as there are in the interstitial fluid. These proteins are large and can't cross the lining of the capillary walls, so they remain trapped within the bloodstream. The liver is the organ that synthesizes and releases more than 90% of the plasma proteins. The 3 main plasma proteins are albumins, globulins, and fibrinogens. Albumins are the most abundant plasma proteins and are the major contributors to the osmotic pressure of plasma. In other words, their presence in the blood causes water to be drawn from the interstitial fluid into the blood. Globulins account for 35% of all plasma proteins. 2 important globulins are antibodies and transport globulins. Antibodies, also called immunoglobulins, attack foreign proteins and pathogens like bacteria. Transport globulins bind small ions, hormones, and other compounds. Fibrinogens function in blood clotting and account for only 4% of the plasma proteins. When fibrinogen molecules interact, they form large, insoluble strands of fibrin that form the basic framework for a blood clot. In addition to the plasma, whole blood contains the formed elements. Formed elements are blood cells and cell fragments that are suspended in the plasma. These elements account for 37 to 54% of the volume of whole blood. The 3 types of formed elements are the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and platelets. These formed elements are produced through the process of hemopoiesis. The stem cells involved in hemopoiesis are the myeloid stem cells and the lymphoid stem cells. The myeloid stem cells will give rise to the red blood cells, the platelets, and all of the white blood cells except for the lymphocytes. The lymphocytes arise from the lymphoid stem cell. Platelets are small membrane-bound cell fragments that contain enzymes and other substances important to clotting. These platelets are formed from the myeloid stem cell as it differentiates into the megakaryocyte. A small piece of cell membrane pinches off the megakaryocyte and forms the platelet. The platelet will begin the process of blood clotting, while the fibrinogens will form a fibrous network around the platelet plug that forms. The white blood cells are also called leukocytes, and they include the neutrophils, the eosinophils, the basophils, the lymphocytes, and the monocytes. All of these stem from the myeloid stem cell except for the lymphocytes. Each of these white blood cells participate in the body's defense mechanisms. It is important to memorize the percentages of different white blood cell types, as well as the basic function of these cells. We will discuss this in another segment. The red blood cells are also called erythrocytes and are the most abundant blood cells. Red blood cells are essential for the transport of oxygen in the blood to the tissues. A red blood cell is very different from the typical cell. It has an unusual shape, with a thin central region and a thicker outer margin, making the surface area of the red blood cell larger and allowing the red blood cells to form stacks like dinner plates. While stacked together like dinner plates, they are able to flow through the narrow blood vessels such as the capillaries.